What's S weird scary childhood memory you didn't realize the seriousness of until you were an adult? We had a school that was next to some woods, and I used to go there with my sister to play during the summer. We were probably 7 and 9. This guy with a leash asked us to help him look for his dog. At first we were both calling for it, and then he started walking into the woods saying he thought he went in there. My stupid butt at 7 just followed him, but my sister stopped and said no Gvep. It's time to go, grabbed my hand and we ran home. I was angry as a child that we never found the dog. As an adult I realized that my sister saved my butt from some serious crap that was about to go down. We never did tell our parents because we were afraid of getting in trouble. We were stupid kids. LOL. When I was like 4 or 5, my mom, brother and I went along with my dad on a business trip to Seattle. I have a distinct memory of being in like a Taco Bell or McDonald's. I can't remember which, but I remember waiting in line, getting in the front, then my mom just taking us and leaving. I remember being so disappointed and my brother and I whining and complaining till we got to the next place. Well, a couple years ago, I'm 28 now, it somehow came up in conversation and my mom told us the whole story. We got to the front of the line and the cashier said, "Those men over there are robbing us. They have guns. Take your children and leave now." So my mom did exactly that and never told us what happened. Best cashier ever. One time, when I was about 10, I was practicing holding my breath in the pool while my uncle, who was living with us at the time, watched me. He held me under the water way too long, to the point where my lungs were burning. I honestly thought at the time that he was just helping me build my endurance, but I later found that my mother and all their siblings were horrendously abused by the father, and my uncle had developed severe anger issues. So I guess he was taking some of that out on me. Haven't seen him in years. What the frick? I got my sandal stuck in this gigantic escalator and was just kind like, this is annoying, until someone saw me trying to pull out when we were almost at the top. Might have lost my foot. When I was 4 or 5, my best friend told me her cousin choked her until she passed out because she wouldn't take her clothes off. It wasn't a scary memory to me at that age, but it horrifies me now. Oh my god, that poor girl. I had a great uncle who I was always creeped out by as a child. I just didn't like being around him. He was creepy and liked to tickle a lot. I was kinda reserved child and didn't want some weird guy tickling me. I remember I had to hide behind their sofa one time so he would leave me alone. My mom didn't like him either, but we had to visit cause she liked my aunt and not many people visited. Turns out, he is a pedophile. Got arrested and convicted 2 years ago. Almost exactly the same story for me. The only difference is he was my grandpa's best friend and it only all came out when he died. He never hurt any of our family, but he abused all of his daughters and granddaughters. I don't think my grandpa has ever got over it. They were best friends for decades and he had no idea of the monster he was allowing to be close to his family. My brother and I were in the garage. I was very young, maybe 3 or 4. He was 2 years older than me. He was practicing swinging this bat around. I walked behind him because our kids are effing stupid, and naturally he hit me with the bat on the back swing. Blood was coming out of my nose, and I was just starting to wail. I could see my brother through the tears. The look of panic on his face. At this point though, it was still just a terrible accident, and it should have been chalked up to that. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is that my brother, now facing me, clutching the bat with both hands, still a look of panic on his face as he was trying to get me to stop screaming. He realized there was no consoling me, so he took the bat with both hands and he hit me across the face with it, again, before he ran out of the garage without looking back. Years later my brother was facing an assault with a deadly weapon charge that he was swearing up and down to all of us that he was not guilty of. It was all a terrible mistake. That memory came back to me. That moment when we were kids, when he had that bat in the garage, when he accidentally hit me across the face the first time, but that second time, that was no accident. He was trying to silence me, for good. All I was to him, in that moment, was a problem. He'd rather me be dead and silent and alive and tattling on him. I didn't testify against him, but I wouldn't be a character witness for him either. He's out of prison now. We don't talk much. This reminds me of the book Tangerine. A boy is blind and his parents tell him it was because of staring at the sun, but then one day he has a flashback and remembers his brother blinding him by spraying paint in his eye. Read that book in middle school and it fricked me up for a good week. For a while, in about 2nd grade, we had a bus driver who drove really strangely. He often took different routes, and once he tried to get the bus down a really narrow lane and it got stuck between a building and a tree, and we all had to get out and push. But the kicker was that one day he forgot to drop off me and my friends. He just completely missed out neighborhood, the last area on his route, and went on to pick up kids at the high school. My 2 friends and I were too scared to speak up. We were sitting in the back seats until a high schooler yelled, "Hey, there's a bunch of little kids back here." The driver cussed a blue streak, peeled out of the HS parking lot, probably without half his next load of kids, and drove us home. All our moms were hysterical, since we were like an hour late, and this was long before cell phones. I told my mom all about the adventures we had with this guy driving, and the next day we had a new driver. Of course, he had been driving around for weeks, drunk, with a school bus full of kids. I remember waking up on our couch and being very bothered that I had been taken from my nice warm bed but too sleepy to say anything. My mom and dad were in the next room screaming at each other, and then mom came to me crying and telling me not to fall asleep. I passed out, woke up laid across the back seat of my papa's truck in the dark with my mom crying in the front seat and my aunt holding me crying. Papa just stared straight ahead like he was mad. Woke up again in a bright room, being jostled around and pinched. Next time I woke up I was back in bed and thought it was a dream. 20 years later I am informed that, age 3, my fever spiked and both mom and dad unknowingly gave me medicine. Those meds reacted to each other and I had a seizure, but dad had to go to work and couldn't be bothered. So my aunt and papa took me to the hospital. Ambulance takes longer. In the truck I was turning blue. The bright room was the air, and the pinches were multiple IVs and tubes and such being placed. I was there, out like a light, for 3 days. A few months ago this happened to my nephew, was a few months over 1. He had a seizure in the high chair and they had to rush to the ER. His eyes were rolling back and he was changing colors in the car ride. There was a house directly behind ours, separated by separate yards and a gate. The house was built similar to ours in that the second floor windows were at the exact same level as ours, allowing you to easily see into your neighbor's bedroom. I have memories of opening my bedroom door to go to bed, only to discover the neighbor had his bedroom lights on, and curtains drawn in the black of the night. It was like a literal spotlight into his bedroom. He would be laying starfishes on his bed and completely naked, staring into my room masturbating. He had to be about 30-40 years old, and I was 10-15. I also cringe at the thought of how he must have watched me, unknowingly and naively undress when I wasn't aware of his presence. That and my friend's neighbor used to have video recorder aimed at her room bathroom. He would stand there naked, stroking his penis and doing other absurd gestures. We never told our parents, or hers. Years later we discovered he was also a Walmart greeter and had been arrested for a myriad of charges including filming his neighbor, child pee, and sexual assault. My friend and I were riding our bikes down a rural country road. A beat-up panel van kept trailing behind us slowly, even though we pulled over multiple times to let it pass. Every time we did it slowed to a stop behind us. Eventually we came to a T, so we pulled over again on the road turning right so the van could get by. Instead, it gunned the accelerator and pulled up next to us and the door flew open. Thankfully a car arrived at the T we just pulled off on. The door on the van slammed shut and it screeched off. Couple months later my parents were watching the news and a picture of the van came on screen. I said, "Hey, friend," and I saw that once and my parents quietly freaked. Apparently it belonged to a dude that had been charged with child pornography and molestation. TLDR, was almost kidnapped on a backwoods country road with my best friend. I broke my collarbone when I was 4. I ran down the driveway and tripped. My mom had just had a baby, like, a few days before, so my dad took me to the hospital. He was a good dad but he's very gruff, no nonsense and presents a little bit intimidating. He was a cop. she fell. I can imagine him saying. The doctor and nurse made him leave the room with me and asked me, "Did your dad do this to you? Did your dad hurt you?" I was completely confused because why would someone's dad ever hurt them? No, I guess they believed me because they let me leave with him in my cast. It was like a heavy tank top. In the summer, when I remembered this later and realized why they were asking, it made me sad to think these questions have to be asked. I'm going to repost this one. It's a direct copy and paste direct from another comment of mine in a very similar AskReddit sub. So when I was like 8 or 9, I won King's tickets out here in a school raffle. Dad couldn't go for reasons I don't remember, and mom's about as anti-sports as you can get, so I took my uncle who's a bit into sports but mostly wanted to be in a private suite and suck down stadium food. Because there was a certain amount allotted to us and we both like stadium food, so he takes me to the box and there's this couple there who were probably in their 20s-ish. I've never been great at estimating ages since the school couldn't afford the whole thing by itself. Whatever, no big deal. They're kinda quiet and make some small talk with my uncle. Then he heads out to get some snacks. The couple kinda sailed over to me. Remember, I'm at that blushy shy kid age, and the woman was rather attractive. Somehow I swear to frick I don't remember how she asked what I would do if she kissed me, then bet me to let her. She kissed me, and I turned that kind of red you only see on stop signs. They had a huge laugh about that, which of course only made me blush harder and get a lot more self-conscious. She started talking about doing it again, and I kinda did that little kid shake my head and crawl down into my seat thing that kids do. She kept calling me cute and then they said something about me going somewhere else with them, and my uncle came back with the stadium food and they went back to their side of the box. I was too dang embarrassed to say anything, and hey, stadium food, so I never gave it a second thought, until like my 20s when somehow that memory surfaced and I went, wait, what the frick? I remember reading your comment before and I still mentally yell what the frick every time. That woman was a predator and I'm sorry she made you feel uncomfortable. I saw pretty shiny things and wrenched myself away from my mom to run over, get onto my hands and knees and look real close at one. They were the reflectors marking the lanes in a busy street and the cars were flying by so fast. I caused a bit of a traffic jam that day. I was 4. Now that I'm older, I understand why everybody got so upset and panicked. When I was around 7, my friend and I thought it would be a fun game to run out into the street and run back before the next car came through. I don't think I have it in me to raise kids. Before taking me and my little brother to school, my dad would open up his shop for the day. The shop was at the ground floor of our apartment building, and while my dad was in the back setting everything up, me and my brother would be sitting in the front. My brother was about 3 or 4 at the time, so most days he'd be crying the whole time because he didn't want to go to school. Well, one day a stranger was walking past the store, saw my brother crying and just walked in and picked him up. Back then as a child I knew it wasn't good for a stranger to be picking up my brother and I should have shouted for my dad, but kid me wanted to believe in the kindness of people and I didn't do anything. Dad eventually saw the guy and ran to the front shouting at him to let go of my brother. The guy ran out the store, only realized several years later how fricked up that was and my brother could have been kidnapped. I was maybe 14 or 15, so not childhood but teenage years, but me and my dad walked into Home Depot, looked around and found no one. Thought how lucky we were gonna be when there was no line at checkout. Finished our shopping 20 minutes later. Walked to the self-checkout registers because there weren't any cashiers. Walked out and was greeted by multiple police officers with rifles. Dad tells me it's just a training exercise and not to worry about it. About a week later my dad tells me that actually someone was holding employees hostage after their robbery attempt failed in the gardening section of the store. This one made me laugh. Just the image of you happily shopping while the entire store is being held hostage. When I was little, 6-8 maybe, my mum, brother and I were on the train traveling home from visiting family. The train suddenly stopped in the middle of nowhere and we just sat there confused for a minute until my mum saw something and gasped and said, "Don't look out the window." Naturally this piqued our curiosity and we clambered all over our mother to get a look out the window while she tried and failed to hold us back. There was nothing there, just some sticks and maybe some paint. Really nothing worth noting. We were like, what gives, and my mother laughed and said, Gotcha. Were you scared? We both slumped back into our seats, disappointed, and waited for the train to start moving again. She told us years later that it had been a suicide by train that we had happened across. There is just no way we could have recognized what we were seeing as a human being, and my mum managed to just play it off as nothing, even though it must have been a truly horrifying sight to somebody who knew what they were looking at. Quick thinking on your mom's part. When I was in grade school, I walked from my house to school every day about a mile. On my walk was a homeless dude that I would always stop to give my vegetables so my mom would think I ate them. One day a friend from my class pulled over with her mother. Her mother offered to drive me to the school with my friend. I told her no. I had to give that dude my veggies or my mom would get mad if I didn't eat them. Also, I know now I could have just tossed them, but I'm a dumb kid. So her mother gets really pushy and is insisting I get in the car, but I just continue on my way. That was the last time I saw that friend. I was little and we weren't super crazy close or anything, so I didn't think anything of it. Later in life I thought about her and asked my mom if she remembered the girl. Turns out her estranged drug addict mom kidnapped her and no one was able to find either of them. We lived close to the Mexico border, so they think she left the US. My mom freaked out when I told her the story and was also kinda mad I used to give my veggies to a homeless dude. I love it. You avoided getting freaking kidnapped because you gave your veggies to a homeless dude. And it's that last part that your mom homes in on. One of the school bus drivers would go through the back roads at about 70 plus. She'd slowed down in town, but was definitely still speeding, even to the point of getting pulled over and receiving a ticket at one point. If you're in a car or a smaller vehicle, 70 plus isn't really out of the norm, but school buses obviously aren't supposed to go that fast. We all thought it was fun, especially when she went over the big hills because we'd all go flying around. It wasn't until she almost got us hit by a train in town that I realized how absolutely dangerous and stupid that was. There weren't any crossing gates to stop her, so she just zipped right through. The train was less than 10 feet from the bus. Kid me brushed it off, but adult me is a bit horrified. My cousins would shut me in the meat locker with fresh deer carcasses when they would come back from hunting. The light switch was on the outside, as well as the door handle. That's really fricked up. There's a line between kids pranking and kids just being sociopathic. I'm sorry that happened to you. Was standing next to my mom in a cosmetic shop while she was trying out makeup. A man walks in, takes a razor off the display, opens it and slits his wrists about 15 feet away. I can picture it perfectly to this day, and it was probably 25ish years ago. I just pulled on my mom's coat to get her attention, then he collapsed. Excuse me, WHT. My dad attacking my mom. I remember one fight specifically. I must have been about 2, and I asked if she was okay, then started playing with my toys while they were still fighting. It also occurred to me, much later in life, how desensitized I must have been to just continue playing. I distinctly remember having just learned how to draw an octagon and that octagons were stop signs in either preschool or kindergarten. So I frantically drew my dad a stop sign to get him to stop hitting my mom. Really fricked up memory. When I was around 8 years old, I was sitting on my grandparents' hammock. I flipped it accidentally and smashed my head on the ground. I remember seeing stars and blacking out. I was afraid of getting into trouble, so I didn't tell anyone what happened. Apparently I had had a hot dog for lunch, because from that day on, my family thought I had an allergic reaction to eating hot dogs. Now that I'm older, I realize that I was having symptoms of a concussion. A couple of friends of mine hung out a few times with the cool teacher and drank beer and watched pornos with him. We were probably 12-13. At the time, I was jealous that I hadn't been invited. Only later did I realize how fricked up that was. I was around 3 at the time, because my mother was pregnant with my second youngest sister, and she took me and my older sister to the local park and told us to stay there until she came back for us. Hours pass. We get hungry, tired, wet ourselves because there's no public toilets, etc. Police show up eventually, start asking us questions about who are we and where are our parents. End up at the police station, scared we're going to get in trouble. Dad walks in and takes us home after a conversation with the police. Mum is gone and doesn't return for 2 weeks. Dad doesn't start taking long truck trips again until after my baby sister is born. My mother had gotten the pregnancy crazies and tried to abandon my sister and I. She was in a psych ward for 2 weeks because my dad came home early and caught her packing a runaway bag. One day when I was about 8 or 9, my mom and I was waiting at a bus stop to head back home after running some errands. We hadn't been waiting long before this couple slowed their car down, pulled over, and informs us that the bus we were waiting on had broken down. They insisted it would be a very long delay if it would be able to come at all. They offered to give us a ride home. My mom immediately lied and said someone is already on the way to pick us up. I remember wondering why my mom lied, but I surprisingly didn't question it. After continuing to offer a ride and my mom refusing twice more, the couple eventually pulls off. Nothing about the couple, older, friendly or car, not the sketchy van you'd expect, screamed stranger danger to me, so I wondered why my mother kept refusing the ride. Not even 5 minutes later our bus arrives. My parents sent me to Christian schools. In 4th grade we got a new teacher. It was a big guy fresh out of college and this was his first job. The principal made a big deal that he thought we were a bad class because our previous teacher had a nervous breakdown and quit her job in the middle of the year. This guy was going to set us straight, and we shouldn't bother complaining to our parents because they signed permission slips saying the school could punish us however they wanted. First day of school, first thing he does is display his preferred means of punishing us. One is a giant ping pong paddle with holes he drilled in it to make it more aerodynamic. He hung that under the American flag. The other was a whip made from a stick and cord. He hung that underneath the Christian flag. At some point throughout the school year everyone got punished with one of those at least once, because he would spank you on your birthday. Boys and girls, it didn't matter. He had a special calendar on the wall next to his desk with everyone's day marked so he wouldn't forget. He had a little ceremony about it. We'd come back in from afternoon recess and if it was someone's special day he'd have a small table pulled out in front of the classroom. Everyone knew who was about to get it and he'd make us all watch. He'd call the kid up in front and make us sing happy birthday. Then he'd make the kid bend over the table and he'd make a big deal about whether he was going to choose the paddle or whip. It was mostly the paddle. Then he'd ask the kid how old they were and they'd say 10. And he would start 10 spankings. He'd get up to 9 and then he'd say something like what time is it? Almost 1, then he'd restart the count from there. 2, 3, 4. Very few kids got just 10 spankings. Nearly everyone cried. If you cried really hard he'd say he was just going to spank you harder. On the last day of the school year he spanked all the kids who were going to have birthdays over the summer. He really enjoyed beating children. It seemed normal at the time because I was a kid and the church taught that Christians are supposed to obey people in authority because God put them in control. To not obey is an act of rebellion driven by Satan, and shows why you should be punished even harder. Didn't realize how messed up and perverted that was until I was an adult. When I grew up I asked my dad why he gave them permission to do that. He said he didn't realize that's what they were doing. I used to run into my classmates more often and that fricked up crap always came up. So many stories in this thread at perverted teachers. I'm so sorry you had to experience that. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.